Have you ever felt the urge to defend yourself, but deep down knew your silence would speak louder? What if I told you that reacting is exactly what they want, and your silence is what defeats them? In a world where lies travel faster than truth, the real power belongs to those who say nothing and still win. The more you explain yourself, the weaker you appear. The more you react, the more control you hand over. And the harder you try to prove your worth, the more obvious it becomes that someone got under your skin. Let's be real, in today's world, overflowing with noise, arguments, and cheap attention, silence is no longer weakness. It's a weapon, because when your words are twisted, when truth is used against you, and when your reaction becomes their entertainment, that's not a discussion, that's a trap. A psychological game, and the louder you speak, the more ground you lose. But here's the twist. You don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. You don't need to defend yourself to be right. You don't even need to fight back to win. All you need is silence and time. Because the moment you go quiet, karma starts talking. You go still, but the universe doesn't. Truth has gravity, and it always returns to its rightful place. In this video, we'll explore 7 moments when a wise person chooses silence, not out of fear, but out of power, to protect their peace, to preserve their dignity, and to let the weight of the other person's actions do all the talking, without lifting a single finger. Because silence isn't the absence of words, it's the presence of mastery. Stick with me until the final part, because the last example will completely change how you understand silence. Let's start with the first. When you're lied about, few things sting more than hearing false words spoken behind your back. The natural reaction: defend yourself, set the record straight, prove you're not who they claim you are. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you explain, the more guilty you look. The more you chase clarity, the more chaos they throw at you. Because the people who spread lies aren't interested in the truth. They're after a reaction. They want to see you sweat. They want you to prove your innocence, just so they can twist that, too, into another weapon. And that's the trap. If you react, you've already surrendered. This is exactly where Stoicism draws the line. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it." Simple. No explanations, no arguments. Just live in quiet alignment with your own values, not their twisted version of your story, because the truth has something that lies never will. Endurance. Lies spread fast, but they crumble quickly. The truth may be slower, but it doesn't need defending. It reveals itself in time. Let me share a story. There was a man, let's call him James. One day, he was falsely accused at work of something he didn't do. Whispers spread. People pulled away. His reputation was under attack. His instinct to defend himself. But instead, he chose silence. He kept showing up, did his work, let his integrity speak louder than his words. Weeks later, the truth emerged. The accuser exposed for past lies and manipulation, and James, because he never fought back, he never lost face. He didn't break down. He didn't stoop low. He rose above it all. That's what Stoic strength looks like. So, how do you respond when someone lies about you? First, trust the long game. Falsehoods are loud, but truth is quiet and lasting. Second, stay grounded in your values. When you know who you are, the noise around you loses its power. Third, let karma speak. You don't need to chase justice. It has a way of catching up on its own. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And in a world obsessed with noise, it just might be your greatest power. And now we take it one step further. Some people don't just lie once, they live in cycles of drama. It's like they breathe conflict, and eventually, their own lies corner them. They trap themselves in their own web. At the end of the day, silence isn't weakness, it's dignity. It's not about hiding, it's about rising above the noise, above the pettiness, above the manipulation and deceit. So let them talk. Let them twist the story however they want. Let them spin their illusions. Because the truth, it always returns. It always finds its way home. When you're betrayed, betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It shifts the ground beneath your feet. It doesn't come from strangers. It comes from those closest to you. A friend, a partner, a family member. And when it hits, it feels like your chest has caved in. Your first instinct is to confront, to cry out, "How could you?" To demand answers, "Why would you do this?" To plead, "Do you even realize what you've done to me?" But here's the brutal truth. The people who betray you have already justified it in their own mind. They've rewritten the story to make themselves feel better. Some don't see what they've done, and the worst part, some do, and they simply don't care. And the more you chase closure, the more you reopen your own wounds. You see, when someone betrays you, what they're really after isn't your forgiveness. It's your energy, your pain, your confusion. Why? Because that reaction tells them they still matter. It makes them feel important. It validates their ego. But what happens when you give them nothing? No rage, no revenge, no desperate explanation. Just silence. That's when it hits them. They didn't just lose access to your words. They lost access to your soul. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Betrayal is friction. It burns, but it also brings clarity. It strips away the illusion. It forces you to face a painful truth, that not everyone you love is meant to stay in your life forever. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, we'll call her Sarah. She had a best friend for over a decade. They shared everything: dreams, insecurities, victories, and setbacks. They were like sisters. But one day, Sarah discovered that her friend had betrayed her, exposed her secrets, undermined her success. Why? Jealousy, insecurity, ego. At first, Sarah wanted to explode. She wanted to confront her, to make her feel the weight of that betrayal. But instead, she chose silence. No drama, no final speech, just a quiet exit. And do you know what happened? The friend waited for the confrontation. She braced for the chaos, the screaming, the blame, the tears. But none of that came. All she received was absence, and that silence. It haunted her, because silence isn't empty. It carries weight. It echoes louder than any argument ever could. So, when betrayal finds you, and someday, it will remember this. First, accept the truth of who they are now. Don't cling to who you thought they were. That version of them doesn't exist anymore. Second, don't waste your voice on someone who already decided your worth was disposable. You don't need to force someone to understand what they've chosen to ignore. Third, walk away. No need for a grand exit speech, because silence creates reflection, and that's the one thing betrayers fear most. At the end of the day, you're not the one who lost. They did. They lost someone loyal, someone real, someone rare. Let them live with that, not through revenge, but through your absence and your peace. Insults are cheap, and that's why the weak use them. But we'll talk about that in the next chapter. Let's continue from before. You've already played their game, and here's the part most people miss. You don't need to win the argument. You just need to not join it. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Read that again. When someone insults you, they're not just throwing words, they're throwing bait. They want to drag you down, to make you lose your composure and meet them in the mud. But a Stoic doesn't go down there. A Stoic doesn't flinch, doesn't fire back. He just observes, calm, still unbothered. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, let's call him David. He had just earned a well-deserved promotion. At the company event, a jealous co-worker couldn't help himself. He smirked and said loudly, "Wow, I guess they're giving promotions to just anyone now." Everyone turned to David, waiting for his reaction. But David didn't argue. He didn't defend. He simply looked the man in the eyes and smiled. Not a word, not a comeback, just silence. And in that moment, David didn't just win the room, he won the war, because silence strips power, and nothing frustrates an insult more than being ignored. So, how do you handle insults? First, recognize what they're fishing for. They're not after the truth, they want your peace. Don't give it away. Second, let your stillness speak. When your face doesn't twitch, when your tone stays calm, it sends a message louder than words. You don't control me. Third, hold your frame. Confidence doesn't argue. Self-respect doesn't explain. And when you refuse to lower yourself, they rise to nothing. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to match their noise. You need to master your silence. Real strength doesn't yell. It doesn't need to. And the most devastating response to an insult is indifference. Some people don't want resolution. They want attention. They don't want peace. They want control. And the fastest way to take control: play the victim, rewrite the story, erase their role, twist the facts, shed a few tears, and suddenly you're the villain. The more you try to explain, the worse it gets. Because to outsiders, it looks like you're attacking someone already hurting. They flipped the script. Now you're the aggressor. They're the misunderstood soul. This isn't a conflict, it's a performance, and you've just been cast as the enemy. Stoic wisdom warns us of this trap. Epictetus once said, "To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate." People who play the victim don't complain for solutions, they complain for sympathy. And if you step in to defend yourself, you validate their performance. The only winning move: silence. Let me tell you another story. There was a woman, let's call her Rachel. Her co-worker constantly twisted reality. Every time she was held accountable, she'd cry, deflect, and shift blame. Rachel stayed calm. She presented facts. She spoke with reason. And it backfired every time, because Rachel was speaking logic, but the other woman was playing emotion. And in the court of public opinion, emotion wins when reason talks too long. So Rachel stopped. No more defense, no more back and forth. Just calm, grounded, stoic silence. And slowly, the truth surfaced. People started noticing. There was always a sob story. Always a new enemy. Always some new injustice. And just like that, the act collapsed. So how do you deal with a manipulative victim? 1. Don't defend yourself. They're not listening, they're performing. And the audience, they love drama. Don't feed it. 2. Stay emotionally detached. Observe, don't absorb. Let them drown in the chaos they created. 3. Trust, karma and repetition. People might believe them once, maybe twice, but patterns don't lie. And eventually, all masks slip. You don't need to explain yourself to someone who thrives in your confusion. Let them keep acting. Let them gather their audience. Let them play out their script. Because sooner or later, the show ends. And silence, that's how you bring down the final curtain. The biggest insult isn't in the words they throw at you. It's in the absence of recognition. You show up, you give, you care. You make the calls, send the messages, offer your presence. And in return, silence, indifference, a lack of interest. No explosion, no dramatic betrayal. Just the slow, quiet erosion of your worth in their eyes. Here's the hard truth. The more you try to prove your value to someone, the less they see it. Because people don't cherish what's always within reach. They value what they're afraid to lose. And when you're constantly available, constantly initiating contact, you don't become essential. You fade into the background. You become invisible. This is where Stoicism returns your power. Seneca once said, "Time discovers truth." And sometimes, the truth they need to discover is your absence. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, let's call him Jake. He was consistent. The friend who always checked in. The colleague who remembered your birthday. The partner who asked about your day, even when you forgot to ask about his. But over time, Jake began to notice something. No one asked how he was doing. No one reached out, lest he reached out first. And when he stopped calling, days turned into weeks of silence. That's when it hit him. He wasn't being valued. He was being used for convenience. So he made a decision. No arguments, no explanations. He simply stopped. And then, the people who truly cared, they reached out. The ones who didn't, they vanished. And that was his answer. So, what do you do when your worth goes unnoticed? First, stop chasing. If they can't see your value while you're present, let them feel it when you're gone. Second, say nothing. Silence creates awareness. When your presence is gone, your worth becomes clear. Third, watch who makes the effort. People who genuinely care won't need a reminder. They'll feel the shift and come closer, not drift away. At the end of the day, you don't prove your worth with effort. You prove it with distance. Because those who deserve your energy will feel the silence, and those who don't, they were never meant to have it. Let your absence speak for you. Let it echo in the space they once took for granted, and never ever begged to be seen by those who already closed their eyes. Now, let's take this one step further. Some people don't want peace. They want a reaction. They poke, they provoke, they throw subtle jabs, not because they're strong, but because it's the only way they feel powerful. And the moment you flinch, they win. The moment you argue, they feed off it. The moment you rise to their bait, they own you. Here's the truth most people miss. Their goal isn't conflict. Their goal is control. They want to break your frame. They want to drag you into their storm. Because if they can trigger your emotions, they become the puppeteer, pulling strings behind a fake smile. But here's where Stoicism becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That is the essence of self-mastery. You can't stop people from trying to provoke you, but you can rob them of the one thing they craved the most. Your reaction. That let me share one more story. There was a man, let's call him Adam. He worked with someone who thrived on chaos. Every meeting, every conversation there was always a jab, a sarcastic comment, a passive-aggressive insult, always disguised just enough to avoid consequences. At first, Adam defended himself. He explained, justified, argued, and every time he walked away, he felt more drained than before, until one day he made a shift. Previously, we saw how Adam responded to disrespect, not with anger, but with powerful calm. That same strength shows up again this time, in silence. There was a moment when a coworker tried to provoke him. Adam simply looked at the man, gave a faint smile, a calm nod, and said absolutely nothing. No sighs, no eye rolls, no tension, just silence, pure detachment. And the result? The coworker flinched. Because when someone is used to playing with fire, they panic when the match doesn't light. Eventually, he gave up. Because even the most toxic flame burns out without fuel. So how do you deal with provocation? First, recognize the pattern. Repetition always reveals intention. If someone consistently tries to start conflict, not personal, it's calculated. Second, hold your frame. Don't take the bait. Don't let your emotions pull you off center. You control your breath, your tone, your presence. Third, let your calm be your strength. The more grounded you are, the more powerless they become. Because not everything that upsets you deserves your energy, and not every enemy deserves your response. The strongest man in the room isn't the one shouting. It's the one everyone tries to provoke and no one can move. Because his silence, it's not empty, it's armor. Regret is loud, but silence is louder. There comes a moment after they've ignored you, dismissed your worth, assumed you'd always be there when they suddenly realize you're gone. And that silence they once overlooked, now it's deafening. They start remembering how you listened, how you showed up, how you gave more than you got. And then it hits them. They didn't just lose a person, they lost a presence, a light, a constant. But by then, it's too late. Here's the truth. If someone only values you after you leave, they never truly valued you when it mattered. And the worst thing you can do is go back. Just because they finally noticed. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And self-mastery means this. You don't return to what broke you. You don't lower your standards to ease their guilt. You don't explain your silence. You let it speak for you. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman, we'll call her Olivia. She gave everything to her relationship, her love, time, and energy. But her partner got too comfortable. He took her for granted, assumed she'd always be there, until one day, she left. No breakdown, no goodbye, no emotion, just a quiet exit. At first he shrugged it off. Then came the silence, weeks, months, unanswered calls. The echo of a presence he didn't know he needed, until it was gone. He apologized, begged, promised to change. But Olivia, she had already healed in silence. And that silence, it became her freedom. So what do you do when someone regrets losing you? First, don't make it easy for them to come back. If your worth was invisible before, let your absence stay visible now. Second, resist the urge to explain. Let them feel the weight of what they did without you softening the blow. Third, stand firm in your silence, not out of revenge, but out of respect for yourself. They had full access to you, and they wasted it now. Let them sit with that truth alone. Because your silence, it's not punishment. It's wisdom, it says. You don't get to walk in and out of my life and still expect the door to stay open. Let them regret, let them remember, but don't let them return. You don't owe them a second chance. You owe yourself peace. You don't need to yell to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. You don't need to speak to make a statement. In a world addicted to noise, silence is radical. It's not weakness. It's not surrender. It's the language of those who no longer need approval. Because when you go silent, you take back your power. You step out of the trap. You let time, truth, and karma finish the sentence. You chose not to write. A Stoic man doesn't chase closure. He doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't crumble under noise. He steps back and lets the universe do what it does best, restore balance. So next time someone lies, betrays, insults, provokes, or regrets, don't respond, don't explain, don't react. Just watch and wait. Because karma doesn't need your help. It just needs your silence. And if this message stirred something deep in you, if you felt truth between these words, don't scroll away. Subscribe to Live Through Stoicism, where strength is quiet, wisdom is sharp, and every word is built to last. And if you know someone who needs this message, send it, share it, or simply let your own silence echo it forward.